Have you heard of the Picts? They were a confederation of tribes living in what is now eastern and northern Scotland around the late Iron Age and medieval period. They were known for their distinctive symbol stones and rich metalwork, and they also played a significant role in the resistance against Roman Britain's northern expedition, notably documented by their presence in Roman records as a formidable adversary. But with a culture that remains somewhat enigmatic due to the scarcity of written records from the Picts themselves, much of what we know comes from external sources, including Roman and later Scottish and Irish chronicles. Regardless, we're going to try and piece it together. And if you want to learn about the Picts, then you're in the right place. Hello and welcome to the channel. If you're coming back, it's good to see you again, and if you're brand new here, it's good to meet you. If you want to support the channel, links to Patreon are in the comments and description. Otherwise, if you want to help YouTube push my content out to more people, then throw a like on the video, subscribe if you feel inclined, or leave your comments down below. Helps me out more than you can imagine. But without further ado, make yourself relaxed, because we're going to learn all about the Picts today. The evolution of the term Pictish and Pict, and its application to the peoples of early medieval Scotland, has of course been a subject of debate, and will definitely do so for the foreseeable future. Now, the traditional view, which painted the Picts as a mysterious and homogeneous group, has been significantly challenged by modern archaeological and historical research. What has been suggested is a much more complex picture of Pictish society, highlighting its diverse and dynamic nature. The archaeological record, while it is sparse in more than a few places, has begun to reveal a society that was rich in material culture, distinctive art, architecture, and unique burial practices that made it unique, setting it apart from the neighboring groups in its vicinity. The Picts' material culture, including the renowned symbol stones, provides valuable insight into their society. These stones, unique to Pictish territories, feature a range of symbols whose meanings remain the subject of speculation, but do indicate a sophisticated system of identity and communication. And similarly, Pictish metalwork, with its intricate designs and techniques, points to a society with rather advanced skills in craftsmanship and artistry, more than they previously get credit for. Excavations of Pictish settlements in our modern times have uncovered swaths of evidence pointing to well-organized communities with substantial dwellings. All of this comes together to indicate a level of social organization and economic stability that rather seems to contradict the traditional notions of them as a barbaric people. Linguistically, the Picts are believed to have spoken one or more Brittonic languages, closely related to Welsh, Cornish, and Breton. This is inferred from place names and the sparse written evidence that survives. Their language, of what we understand to it, contributes to the view of the Picts not as an isolated barbarian group, but as part of the broader tapestry of early medieval British Isles, interacting with and influencing their neighbors. And the more we dig, the more we find out. We're always finding out more about the Picts. In fact, by the time this video is out, we may have discovered many things that are completely new. In fact, the level in which we discover things through our digs in northern Scotland and areas that are assimilated with the Picts certainly may even contradict the information in this video, depending on the time you're viewing it. If you're viewing it 10 years later, then certainly don't start yelling at me in the comments if new information has been found. Now, the transition from the use of Pict as an exonym by Roman and early medieval writers to its adoption as an endonym by the peoples of northern Britain themselves is seen as a key development in the Pictish identity. This shift reflects a growing sense of unity and also self-awareness among the Pictish polities, especially in the face of external threats and internal consolidation. The Battle of Dun Nectain, for instance, is a pivotal event in Pictish history that underscores their military prowess and helps solidify their identity against external aggressors. But we'll get to those things in due time. Let's just first understand what kind of people we're dealing with here. Now, by the 9th century, the merging of the Picts with the Gaelic-speaking Dal Riata under the Alpanid dynasty certainly marked the traditional end of the Picts as a distinct group, at least in historical records. This merger gave rise to the Kingdom of Alba, a precursor to modern Scotland, blending Pictish and Gaelic cultures. The legacy of the Picts, however, remains an integral part of Scottish history and identity, with their art, language, and material culture continuing to fascinate scholars and the public alike. I mean, you're here watching an hour-long video on them, aren't you? That's sort of got to say something, doesn't it? Now, going back all the way to the beginning, let's try and trace how the Picts came about. They didn't simply spring out of the ground, didn't they? Well, you see, the narrative of the Picts, from obscure barbarians to key players in the formation of Scotland, underscores a danger of the ethnic fallacy and highlights the importance of nuanced approaches to historical and archaeological evidence. Modern scholarship continues to peel back these layers and gives us a complex image of what was previously thought to be a rather simple one. Well, this genetic study of the Picts serves as a pivotal piece of evidence in understanding the Pictish lineage and origins, significantly enhancing our comprehension of their roots within the British Isles. And it shows a continuity of population in certain regions of Britain, despite the myriad of cultural transformations and invasions documented in historical texts. Now, for the Picts in particular, it suggests that rather than being foreign settlers, as proposed in origin myths, were deeply integrated into the fabric of early British society, sharing a common ancestry with other Celtic groups in Britain and Ireland. Think about it. Many times when we hear about an ancient people, the first time we hear of their origins is simply when they came from somewhere else, whether they came down from the steppes of Asia, or they crossed the Rhine, or perhaps they forded that channel and came over to the British heartland. But the Picts, seem to have been completely homegrown. Now, the narrative of the Picts arriving from Scythia, as recounted by Bede in the Pictish Chronicle, while intriguing, yes, aligns with a common medieval practice of linking groups to illustrious or mythical origins to assert their legitimacy and understanding. But it's not really a historical certainty. Well, the specific naming of Cruithin and his sons, correlating with the provinces of Pictland, further served to politically unify the region under a shared mythos, weaving a collective identity that transcended individual tribes and territories. The recent genetic findings not only challenge these traditional narratives, but they also provide a scientific foundation for the understanding of the Picts' origins. By highlighting the genetic similarities between the Picts and other Celtic groups in the western and northern parts of the British Isles, this new research points to a predominantly indigenous origin. And it aligns with archaeological evidence that depicts the Picts as an integral part of the complex tapestry of peoples that inhabited late Iron Age Britain, rather than simply outsiders who arrived from afar. Now, these findings also enrich our understanding of the cultural and politics of early medieval Britain. They suggest that the formation of Pictland was not solely a political or military endeavor, but was underpinned by a shared genetic heritage that bound its people more closely to the land and, of course, to each other. This sense of belonging and a shared identity likely played a crucial role in the Picts' resistance to external pressures and their ability to maintain a distinct cultural identity in the face of Rome and, of course, the later Anglo-Saxon expansion. Furthermore, the genetic studies identification of what is known as broad affinities among the Celtic peoples of Britain and Ireland underscores more of the fluidity of the genetic and cultural boundaries in the past. For example, it suggests that despite the fragmentary nature of historical and archaeological records, modern scientific techniques can offer new insights into the connections between peoples of the British Isles, and it all seems to reveal a shared heritage that predates many of the divisions documented in historical sources. Now, this transition from the Picts, known in Roman and early medieval sources, to the Gaelic-speaking Scots of later periods, certainly marks another fascinating chapter in the history of Britain, which, honestly, I've been researching quite a lot more lately, and I think that the history of the Bronze Age is certainly going to have to take a back seat for a while. Anyway, the transformation was not abrupt. It didn't happen straight away, but it was more of a gradual process of cultural assimilation, but also political realignment, influenced by various external and internal pressures. This period witnessed significant shifts in power dynamics, from the dominance of Northumbria to the rise of Pictish kings who exerted influence over neighboring kingdoms, including Dalriata and, to an arguably lesser extent, Alt-Clut. The defeat of Northumbria at the Battle of Dun Nectain in 685 under Bride mac Bailly was a pivotal event that not only checked Anglian expansion, but also solidified Pictish independence for the time being. Of course, our timelines between looking at this history are a little bit difficult to establish. So we will be discussing these major events that we have from different sources. So don't be too surprised as if I don't start from the beginning with the Picts, because we don't really know, at least as of yet. We have to start where the Romans tell us to start, and the other chroniclers from Britain and Ireland. So, back to the Battle of Dunnachtain, which victory allowed the Picts to maintain their autonomy and even assert a good amount of dominance over Dalriata, a Gaelic kingdom with ties to both Britain and Ireland. The reigns of Oengus mac Fergusa and later Castantin mac Fergusa illustrate the peak of Pictish power, with the former bringing Dalriata under Pictish sway, and the latter placing his lineage on its throne. However, the arrival of the Vikings in the 9th century introduced new challenges and reshaped the political landscape of Scotland and the wider British Isles. Also, people started losing their body parts to the Viking axes, and this generally made people a little bit upset. The Vikings' raids and resettlements disrupted the existing order, leading to a decline in the established kingdoms like Northumbria, Strathclyde, and the emergence of new entities such as the Kingdom of York and the Kingdom of the Isles under figures like Ketil Flatnose. The pivotal battle of 839, where significant Pictish and Dalritan leaders were slain, showed the vulnerability of these kingdoms to Viking incursions. And I will have a full video on the Viking invasions of Britain very soon, so hold your horses. The ascension of Kenneth MacAlpin, a figure of mixed Pictish and Dalriatan heritage, to the kingship of the Picts, marked a key moment in the fusion of these two cultures. Under his reign and that of his descendants, particularly Constantin mac Aeda, the process of Gaelicization accelerated. This was not merely a substitution of one elite for another, but it was more of a profound cultural integration that saw the gradual erosion of Pictish language and identity, replaced by that of the Gaelic Scots. By the 11th century, the inhabitants of Alba had fully embraced Gaelic language and culture, and the distinct identity of the Picts faded into the annals of history. These transformations were noted by later historians, such as Henry of Huntingdon, who observed the disappearance of the Picts as a distinct people. Despite this, the legacy of the Picts continued to resonate, revived in myths and legends that celebrated their historical significance. But don't worry, in modern Scotland very few people speak Gaelic. Of course, they have their own language, though down in Wales they've seemed to maintain their language quite well, albeit they seem to get rather touchy when there isn't bilingual signs everywhere you go, even though they all speak English perfectly well. But still, the Scottish have certainly seemed to have lost a lot of their linguistic heritage, not through any fault of their own. For a lot of the time, they simply were not permitted to speak it. Anyway, the fragmented nature of the early Pictish society, with its multitude of kingdoms, gives us a complex political image that was far from the centralized nation-states that are familiar to us today. The evidence drawn from medieval documents such as Desitu Albaniae, the Pictish Chronicle, and the Duan Albanach, along with Irish legends, suggests a tapestry of territories each under its own rule, but connected by a common cultural and ethnic heritage. This mosaic of kingdoms, namely Kate, Kay, Kirsin, Fib, Fidak, Fortriu, and Fortla, each with its own domain within the region now known as Scotland, indicates a society where power was both divided and shared. Whether that's the truth or not still remains a matter of debate, but it certainly seems that way. Now, Fortriu's prominence among these kingdoms, as suggested by historical records, signifies its role in particular as a political and possibly a cultural center of Pictish life. The revision of Fortriu's location to Moray, based on recent scholarly work, challenges earlier assumptions and underscores the evolving understanding of Pictish society. This dominance of Fortriu might explain why in some sources the title King of Fortriu was synonymous with King of the Picts, highlighting the kingdom's preeminence among the rest. The suggestion of matrilineal succession, based on Irish legends and Bede's writings, introduces an intriguing aspect of Pictish kingship. The accounts of Bride and Nectan, sons of Der Ilay, claiming the throne through their mother, a daughter of an earlier Pictish king, offer a glimpse into the unique social mechanisms at play within Pictish society. This matrilineal practice, although not universally accepted among scholars, suggests a society where lineage and inheritance might differ significantly from the patrilineal models common in many other early medieval European societies. The Pictish approach to kingship, with its preference for rulers selected from a pool of candidates with royal lineage extending back to a great-grandfather, gives us a nuanced system of succession that emphasized experience and authority over direct patrilineal descent, which is somewhat rare for the time. Now, this system mirrored the Irish practice of tanistry, ensured the mantle of leadership did not automatically pass from father to son, but rather to a male relative, and it was often a brother or a cousin who was deemed most capable of ruling. So no free rides just because daddy likes you. Such a method likely helped maintain stability and continuity within the kingdom, as it favored seasoned leaders over potentially inexperienced heirs. Now, over time, the nature of Pictish kingship of course evolved and changed, moving from a focus on individual war leaders to a more structured and collective form of governance. This transition, while stopping short of the bureaucratic kingship that would characterize later periods, began to reflect a greater institutionalization of power. The role of the Church in supporting kingship and the dominance of a few families in controlling succession from the late 7th century onwards played its own role in this transformation. These developments all came together to hint at the early stages of a more systematic approach to governance, which set the stage for the later emergence of Alba. The institution of mormaers, akin to earls, and the establishment of shires and tannages further show the Picts' adaptation and innovation in governance. Borrowing and adapting concepts from their Northumbrian neighbours, the Picts integrated these elements into their own system, possibly transforming former kings, royal officials, and local nobles into these new roles. Such changes signify a pivotal shift in Pictish society from loosely organized kin-based groups to more formally structured political entities. The material culture of the Picts, revealed through archaeological findings, portrays a society deeply rooted in agricultural practices, common to many of their contemporaries in late antiquity. Their existence as farmers within cohesive communities shows a shared way of life across various Celtic, Gaelic, and Anglo-Saxon groups throughout northern Europe. Their economy, predominantly pastoral, highlighted the significance of livestock, cattle and horses in particular, as indicators of wealth and status. The more cows and horses you had, the better off you were. The management and breeding of these animals, especially cattle for size and quality, might have mirrored the competitive practices observed in contemporary elite circles in Ireland, hinting at a similar cultural value placed on livestock excellence within the Pictish society. And there's also evidence of hunting, with dogs and, uniquely, falcons, which contrasts with Irish customs and gives us a more diverse picture in leisure and sustenance activities. The cultivation of cereal crops and vegetables, along with the possible gathering of wild plants, provided a varied diet complemented by the rich resources of the surrounding seas and rivers. The archaeological record hints at a diet heavily reliant on animal products for the common populace, while the elite enjoyed the added luxury of hunted game. Despite the agricultural prosperity and technological advancements, such as water mills and kilns, the Picts did not develop urban centers or large settlements comparable to those found in Gaul or southern Britain. The larger settlements that did exist were primarily clustered around royal forts or religious establishments, and it shows a suggestion of a society structured around defensive and spiritual centers instead of overly commercialized urban development. The absence of significant urban centers until the 12th century in Scotland further emphasizes the rural and dispersed nature of the Pictish, and, by extension, early Scottish settlement patterns. The technological aspects of the Picts' daily lives were not really extensively documented, but they do appear to align with those found in Ireland and Anglo-Saxon England. The aforementioned discovery of water mills within Pictland, for instance, reveals a level of technological sophistication and adaptability to the environment. Plenty of other places who didn't have them for a long time. Similarly, the use of kilns for grain drying reflects another ingenuity, overcoming the challenges posed by Scotland's unpredictable and frankly unpleasant climate. Now, the notion of the Picts as seafarers, engaging in both piracy and commerce, shows another aspect of their society that's not often talked about. Now, it wasn't just piracy either. There's economic reasons for seafaring. This dual role as both traders one day and raiders the next day, see what I did there? Particularly evident in the murky waters of late antiquity's maritime activities, shows the Picts as a people with the capacity for navigating the economic landscapes shaped by the ebb and flow of the Roman Empire's inclinations. The evidence of Gaulish tableware and storage vessels in Pictland, while sparse, does give us hints of a network of trade routes that, despite the assumed decline following Rome's fall, maintained a lifeline of long-distance commerce, likely facilitated through strategic points like Dunad in Dalriata. Now on to the Picts' architectural legacy, encapsulated in structures such as brochs and crannogs, further illuminating our understanding of their society through this architectural design. The continued use of brochs, which are ancient stone towers from the Iron Age well into the Pictic era, alongside the reconstruction of crannogs, which were man-made island dwellings, shows a blend of tradition with innovation, and I for one am glad they kept the old style around. Never goes out of fashion, a nice big stone structure. Now, here's a misconception. If you guys have played Rome Total War, I'm sure you know it. Contrary to the popular belief that the Picts were extensively tattooed, the archaeological and artistic record shows a bit more of a nuanced picture. So, maybe they could have, maybe they couldn't have, but monumental stones across Pictland depict nobles, hunters, and warriors devoid of the anticipated tattoos, presenting instead a rich picture of Pictish life rendered in Latin inscription, Ogham script, and enigmatic symbols. But no tattoos. In fact, every time we come across a drawing of a Pict, even in their own rather crude styles, we don't see any tattoos. Well, these artifacts that we have found, resisting definitive interpretation, also give us a bit more of a mystique surrounding the Pictish culture, yet they also align the Picts with the broader Celtic and later insular art traditions. Pretty much the same sort of thing, but with some minor differences. Now, what about religion? What were they all about? Well, the religious parts of early Pictland, of course, like everything else, shrouded in the mysteries of antiquity and time, give us a complex tapestry, interwoven with Celtic polytheism and also the new Christian monotheism. While definitive records of pre-Christian beliefs are rare, with only place names hinting at ancient practices, the transition to Christianity in Pictland unfolds as a series of fragmentary historical and archaeological clues. The arrival of Christian missionaries, such as Saint Palladius, and the connections with Saint Brigid of Kildare, herald the onset of Christianity's spread within the Pictic realms. The mention of apostate Picts by St. Patrick, and the silence of the poem E. Gododin regarding pagan practices among the Picts further illustrate the early Christian influence. Bede's accounts of St. Ninian's conversions, although muddled with later saints, suggest that the Christianization of the Picts began in the south. The archaeological discoveries at Point Mahamak, revealing a monastery established in the late 6th century, challenged previous assumptions about the timing and extent of Christianity's reach in Pictland. This period, coinciding with the reigns of notable figures like Bride Mac Melkon and Columba, shows us another pivotal phase in the Christian journey across Pictic territories. Though the complete Christianization process undoubtedly spanned several generations. But the religious identity of the Picts wasn't solely shaped by the influence of Ireland and Iona. Northumbrian connections, particularly during Nectan Mac Der Ilei's reign, underscore a complex picture of external ecclesiastical influences. Nectan's reported expulsion of the Ionan clergy, possibly tied to liturgical disputes, reflects both the tensions between different Christian traditions, but also the Pictic kings' efforts to assert their authority over religious matters. The Pictland religious institutions, unlike the monastic central model of Ireland, developed a parochial structure from an early stage. Significant religious sites like the one at Portmahomack, St. Andrews, Dunkeld, Abernethy, and Rosemarkie, likely under royal patronage, highlight the role of Pictish kings in fostering and controlling the church's growth within their territories. Extensive excavation and research conducted at Portmahomack exemplify the scholarly efforts to unravel the intricacies. So who knows what we're going to find out next? Excavations are still going on. Now, also along with the Irish and English was the veneration of saints, playing a crucial role in Pictic spirituality, with both major figures like St. Peter and St. Andrew, and also some lesser-known local saints receiving devotion. The personal patronage of saints by noble families, each with their preferred holy figure and religious establishment, points to a deeply personal aspect of faith that intertwined with familial and political identities. Now, that's enough about the religion. Let's talk about their language a little bit more. We briefly touched upon it, but it's always interesting to talk about things that we don't know much about. Let's look at the little things that we do know. Now, it is an extinct language. It's completely gone. And it's known only through scattered place names, personal names, and indirect testimony of records in other languages. These fragments do suggest a linguistic landscape where Pictish, an insular Celtic tongue akin to the Brittonic languages of southern Britain, was thriving, at least for a while. The divergence of Pictish from its southern counterparts likely stemmed from its reduced contact with Latin, painting a picture of a linguistic evolution uniquely shaped by cultural isolation. While despite the dearth of direct written evidence from the Picts themselves, particularly in the absence of written material in Pictish beyond the cryptic Ogham inscriptions, it would be erroneous to consider Pictish society as lacking in literacy. The Latin literacy required by the Church for the creation and dissemination of liturgical texts does imply a certain level of scholarly activity. Iconographic evidence from Pictish stones depicting individuals engaging with texts further supports the idea of a literate elite, particularly within the ecclesiastical and monastic communities. The progression of Gaelic into Pictland is traceable through toponymic evidence, with names such as Athol, possibly meaning New Ireland, indicating Gaelic expansion or influenced by the early 8th century. Further, the region of Fortriu offers place names that either reflect Gaelic settlement or are influenced by the Gaelic language, illustrating the linguistic interplay and cultural exchange between Gaelic speakers and the Pictic population. And it's easy to hear Gaelic, by the way. Not many people speak it anymore, like I said, but look on YouTube. It's making a little bit of a comeback. You'll certainly find some people speaking Gaelic. Now, the surviving Ogham inscriptions found on Pictic stones represent a tantalizing yet opaque window into the Pictish language. Initially deemed incomprehensible and non-Celtic by modern linguists, these inscriptions have since been subject to reinterpretation, within a Celtic framework, of course. However, the true nature and linguistic affiliations of these inscriptions, well, we don't really know for sure. It's just one of those emblematic challenges in unraveling the heritage of the Picts that maybe we'll never figure out. But Pictish art, that's something we do know a little bit about, with its rich tapestry of symbols, animal motifs, and intricate metalwork. It offers us a pretty transparent window into the cultural and aesthetic aspects of the Picts. The monumental stones, the most iconic carriers of Pictic artistry, scatter the landscape of what was once Pictland, bearing witness to a unique blend of local and external artistic influence. These stones, adorned with mysterious symbols such as the enigmatic Pictish beast, rectangles, mirrors and combs, double discs and crescents, as well as a variety of other motifs, show the distinctive Pictish contribution to the wider Celtic and insular artistic traditions of early medieval Europe. The fusion of curvilinear patterns, meticulous hatchings, and both secular and Christian iconography on the cross slabs encapsulates the syncretic nature of the Pictish art. The interlace of animal patterns derived from insular art combined with Christian imagery highlight their integration into the broader insular world, while preserving their unique artistic voice. And then, of course, there's the metalwork, distributed throughout Scotland and beyond, showing a wealth and connections of the Pictish elite. The presence of substantial silver hoards, possibly acquired through raiding, or perhaps as tribute to prevent other people raiding you, underscores the Picts' active engagement in the power dynamics of the period. The loss of much of the Norre's law hoard to melting down is one of the lamentable gaps in our knowledge, unfortunately. Yeah, you wouldn't believe how many things they've melted away. All those times Rome was invaded and they had to melt down those old statues to pay the barbarians off. I shudder to think about it. Well, the heavy silver chains and the adoption and adaptation of Irish Celtic brooch form in Pictish metalwork further show the cultural exchanges and the aesthetic choices of the Pictish elite in the post-Christianization era. The preference for true penannular brooches with lobed terminals along with the transformation of older Irish brooches into Pictish styles, reflects another nuanced engagement with Irish art, while asserting their own identity. If you want to see something interesting, look up the St. Ninian's Isle treasure. Now that's a testament to Pictish mastery of metalwork. It shows Pictish and Irish stylistic elements in this rather dazzling array of personal and ceremonial adornment. Go and take a look. And with that, we reach the end of our video for today. Who would have thought that you would have ran across a video about the Picts? Don't worry, Picts, I haven't forgotten you. Well, I'd like to thank my Mega Chat tiers, what are they called? Patrons, that's right. I almost said subscribers. Them being Stark Factory, JC, and Jeffrey. Thank you very much, lads, for supporting the channel through Patreon. If you would like to support the channel through Patreon, you know what to do. Follow the links in the description. But most importantly, I hope you've learned a little bit today about the Picts. As long as we keep talking about these old civilizations, well, cultures, I suppose, then they're never really lost. Good night. See you in the next video.